Is your team toxic? And if it is, what can your employers do about it? And how big an impact is that having on your life and your desire to stay in your job? Welcome back to the mental space. Now, today I am joined by an expert in teams, Mr. Andy Fieldhouse, the founder of the Team Space, and the best-selling author of
Getting Teamwork Right.
Getting Teamwork Right. And I got his title right, which is a miracle. Andy, welcome to the podcast. We're all friends. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah.
The challenge of teamwork. First off, for the audience, just introduce yourself a little to them. Tell us what you do.
Okay. So basically, I coach team relationships. It's a coaching-based approach to working with teams. What that means is diving into the challenges, issues, problems, successes that they're having on a very bespoke basis in order to identify what needs to change, how they need to grow, what do they need to keep doing, having conversations around their needs with the intention that they uncover their own kind of actions, their own ways of doing things for themselves. I've been doing that for about 7 or 8 years. I've been in team development, team training, team building for 15 years now, since I came to the UAE in 2008.
Okay, so that's what you do, but I always love a bit of like a Marvel superhero origin story. Why do you do it? What brought you to this field of work?
Yeah, and this is something that I do a lot of work with teams around purpose and meaning, and why should we be doing what we're doing? Teamwork is about choice. People need to choose to be there and choose to do the work that they're there to do. And so in that process of examining the purpose of others, I kind of sort of went, well, why do I do what I do? And there's kind of two answers. One is I'm a father, I've got young children, I want the world to be a better place for them. That's for any parent extremely motivating.
Yeah.
But on a fundamental level, doing the work that I do over these years, I've connected my own personal experience of being in teams and working in teams with the work that I do. And I was an expat kid. My father worked for British Airways. Back in the 70s and 80s, you couldn't school in the countries that we lived, and so we had to be sent to boarding school. So at the age of 8, I was packed off with a trunk and sent off to the UK, a cold and alien country for me at the time. It snowed in my first week at school. I didn't know what was going on. But the point is, in the team context, is you are separated from your team, in this instance, your family, and you are placed into another team, into a school full of people in a very British stiff upper lip, old school environment. The teachers that I had been teaching since the 1950s. It was all kind of iron beds and bed sheets had to be made the right way. And what it gave me was a strong understanding of what it's like to be part of something where you feel alone and you feel like you don't belong and you don't want to be there, but there's nothing you can do about it. And, it was hard and it was tough. And by the way, I have no blame to my parents for making the decisions. That's what they did back then. That's what you had to do. But what it gave me was a strong sense of what you don't want. And I think far too many people in corporate life kind of accept or expect that, it's corporate life. I've got to put up with the crap.
Yeah.
And you don't have to. And so I spent the rest of my life initially subconsciously, because I pushed all of that experience down and put it into my subconscious, and I just kind of got on with things. But what I did was seek out opportunities to belong, to be part of great teams, whether it was a sports team as a kid, whether it was a business, whatever I did, or I created the opportunities with my friends to be part of something. And the contrast between that existence of feeling lonely and feeling alone, and I know that it's fundamental to every human being, the need to belong, and being part of something amazing. I don't want anyone to have to go through that experience. I want to help people create the environments where they do belong, where they want to be there, where they get the rewards for the work that they do, and that they feel not only just the financial rewards, but the kind of deep satisfaction of knowing that they're part of something that's doing good in the world, and that they belong. And so that's why I don't describe my work as a job. I describe it as a calling. I feel fundamentally that I have been called to this work, and that I'm here on this earth to do it. And, that's very easy for me to get out of bed in the morning.
It's a pretty powerful statement. I'm trying to dispel images of you at Hogwarts walking out.
Yeah, I mean, it very much was.
Yeah.
You should see the pictures of the place. It was definitely that kind of environment.
It's interesting you talked about loneliness, though. I mean, this is something that's increasingly coming on to the agenda. We had Dr. Rangan Chatterjee on this podcast just recently, and he was talking about the impact of loneliness on us if we feel isolated, whether that be at the workplace, whether that be within our team, whether that be within our family unit. I mean, the science on that one says it's as toxic as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
We've now had the US Surgeon General actually now call it as toxic as tobacco, and is described as the latest new sort of public health crisis. How has your experience with loneliness then shaped how you now work with teams? Or when you're confronted by loneliness in the teams that you work with, what's the fix? How do you address it? How do you even recognize it?
There's some stuff that's common to all, whatever team, and it's important to recognize the definition of team, right? Two or more people who are interdependent with what they're trying to do together that they can't do alone. So I apply that in the corporate market. It's families, it's sports teams, it's relationships, couples, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And there is some stuff that transcends, whether it's work or play or whatever else it is. I can speak from the corporate setting, and one of the fundamental things to understand and to be aware of is the element of choice. Everyone gets an interview, they get offered a job, and they choose to take that job. It's voluntary. It's different if you're called up for national service or if you're sent to prison. I get it. Yeah. But in the corporate world, there's choice. Families, it's a bit different. You can't choose your family. Now, the key is because what I do is help teams perform, and they want success and they want to hit their numbers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Every single day, you want everyone on the team to be voluntarily choosing to do what you want them to do the best work they're capable of, and to contribute. And every day people are, or they're not, on a scale of engagement and contribution. So the fundamental thing is how do you get that choice? How do you get people to feel like they belong, and that they want to do it? And there's lots of different answers here. Part of it is relationships. I do a lot of work around the strength or the health of the relationship between people. And that's a bit like a bank account of positivity and negativity, and you can talk a lot about that. Part of it, sometimes, the first work that we do is around purpose and meaning, and why are we here? What are we doing in the first place? And it's not revenue or share price. That's a result. It's the bit before that, and again, we could talk about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation with teams, and too often it's all extrinsic. If you do this, you'll get rewarded, and there are incentives and pay, and if you don't do it, there are consequences and there's punishment. But trying to get teams to understand why I should choose to do it. Oh, and I get paid, that's a result. Oh, that's great. But what really deeply satisfies me and makes me feel like I belong here is the shared concept of the good that we're doing in the world.
Now, that feels like that's something that's always been true. But have you seen that through the course of your work become a bigger and bigger requirement? We see the US chairman of PwC saying the war on talent is over, talent won. Increasingly, we've got Gen Zs who, and the millennials who have access to technology that you or I didn't have when we were entering the world of work. Yeah. We had fewer choices. And perhaps I think the old school management didn't think that employment was a choice, thought the power balance or the relationship balance was you're lucky to have this job and therefore just do as you're told. But increasingly, it seems that balance within the relationship, call it power, call it strength, just call it independence, is employees are beginning to realize that they do have that choice. Have you seen more focus on that? Or is it just kind of like an awakening that actually, if you want your team to perform, that's always been the case. Doesn't matter how far you go back to sports teams in history. That choice is more powerful than, a volunteer is more. It is worth 5 conscripts. That type of...
Yeah. One thing about coaching teams and working with teams is you can only coach teams who want to be coached. And if there isn't an appetite to explore and do things differently and find a different path, they're not going to come to me. So maybe sometimes I don't see the dinosaurs who aren't willing to change, and they're kind of still plowing that furrow, and that's a generational thing that will change. So that's one thing. The teams I do see and I get to work with are, to an extent, curious, and
which is a good starting point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You should be, and you need to be open-minded to the possibilities of what you could do differently. When it comes to this kind of purpose and Gen Z and all these kind of buzzwords that people are using, you still find people who don't kind of get it. And I'll try to give you this example of a meeting I had yesterday without mentioning names, of a company that sells cars. And they're having difficulty with people who are tasked with selling car A, and the group also sells car B and car C and car D types, but they're not cross-referring. If they can't sell car A, well, I'm not going to give these guys in car B outfit a go. And so I spoke to them and I just said, hang on a minute, let's take a step back. You're all trying to sell cars. Why? What are you doing? What you're trying to do is help people. You're trying to improve lives. And I said, how many of you are parents? People put their hand up. And I said, do you remember when you took your child home from the hospital that first time? And you get in the car and you're driving along really slowly because you want it to be safe. And you get home and you get the baby out and you're going to go, oh, thankfully, the car kept me safe. That's an emotion. That's a feeling. That's what you should be selling. That's what you should be motivating your people to think differently about how you sell cars. And then you can say, well, we need to sell these people the right car. If it's not car A, then maybe it's car B. Give them their phone number. Take them to that showroom. And it's that. And these people are like, oh yeah, we should do this. This is what we should do. And I was like, really? You never. For me, it just seems.
Which goes back to purpose, meaning.
Well, it does, and I think sometimes maybe I just, why aren't people thinking like this? But maybe that's because I'm doing it every day with teams. I'm tuned into it. I see it happening. I see it working. I hear incredible stories about people who unlock things. I work with a pharmaceutical company, and I said, why are you doing what you do? Because a lot of those kind of big pharmaceutical companies, it's about numbers. It's about how many things we're selling, how much money we're making. I said, wait a minute. Well, what are your drugs for? Well, okay, they're for doctors to give to patients. Yeah, but what are they for? Well, they help people get better. Right. So have you ever heard from the people who are getting better? And one person in the room said, oh, do you remember that conference we had, that cycle meeting like 4 years ago? And we had the cancer survivor come up on stage and tell his story about how he survived cancer. Everyone was like, oh, yeah. I said, well, that's what you need to be doing. Get those stories, find those opportunities to connect people with that as a mission, as a kind of motivation. That'll get them out of bed in the morning. And you connect and you share it and you make it conscious and intentional and front of mind that everyone is bought in behind that kind of thing as one piece of the puzzle. It's only just one part of it.
I hesitate to call it a buzzword, but a phrase that's coming to mind a lot lately is psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
And that's connected to individuals' mental health, how they feel in their workplace. Again, is the team toxic?
Yeah.
What are the ingredients for you of a psychologically safe space?
Yeah. So for those people that don't know, what is psychological safety? And you know what? In the last 7-8 years of doing the coaching work that I do a lot on psychological safety. And I used to ask, who's heard the term? No one would put their hand up. More recently, in the last year or two, maybe a quarter to a half the room will put their hand up. So it's becoming something that is becoming more known as a concept. Essentially, it is a comfort level with speaking up, that people feel able to express themselves, to admit mistakes, failures, safe in the knowledge that they won't be judged or ridiculed or in some way diminished within the team. So what is it for me? It is, and I've worked in teams. I've been myself in teams that have a high level of psychological safety. It is just the comfort factor and the knowledge that you can just stick your hand up. and you can disagree, and you can say, I know you've explained it like 5 times, but I'm still not getting it. Rather than saying, oh, I can't say anything, and I'm going to clam up, I'm going to second guess what I need to say here. I better not do this, I better not do that. And again, go back to that element of choice. You want people to be able to choose to do the work they want to do. And if they're not safe in how they can be themselves, they're going to be hesitating. They're going to be kind of, do I do this? Do I do that? They'll be looking over their shoulder. Is someone going to stab me in the back? Will I be judged? All of these kind of things. So it is creating that comfort level with openness and honesty and speaking up. Now, the interesting thing working in this region, it's very multicultural.
Yeah.
We have people from 200 odd countries living in the UAE. All the teams I work with are represented by all the continents most of the time. I know that there are some human level things that transcend culture and nationality. And for some, culturally, psychological safety is difficult for some people, where there is rank and privilege and fear and power and shame and honor, cultural dynamics.
Yeah.
That makes it harder to build psychological safety. But I have seen it work, and I know that it can work because I believe it is a fundamental human right and a thing that people like. And if you can break down those barriers by trying it and consciously making agreements around it with your team to say, why don't we do this? Now, you can introduce it as a concept at a theoretical level, and it all sounds amazing, but you've got to do it. You've got to create the ways and the opportunities for people to be more open and to be more honest. And if people are, you need to know how to handle it and how to deal with it. And it's a little bit like little green shoots. If you're starting out with psychological safety, you quickly, if you stamp on a little green shoot, it's going to die. You've got to give it time. You've got to water it. You've got to let it have sun until it grows into a really strong tree. So within the team, that kind of habit of psychological safety needs to grow. And then people will feel more that they can be themselves. And again, it goes back, and that's going to influence performance.
So that can be quite difficult. It seems to me like it's quite a brave step for a team to go, do you know what, we are actually going to try psychological safety, which doesn't mean I never say anything that somebody might not disagree with. And I think that's sometimes what's happening, where everybody's hiding at work for fear of. When you go in and work with teams, then you must encounter this. How do you start dismantling that? Or how do you start building that trust that people can take a risk and go, this is what I think, without, creating confrontation with the individual on their own team that they perhaps disagree with or have a different idea or a different direction?
Yeah. Many moving parts to this.
Yeah.
One is to educate and help.
You could just download your entire brain in this.
Yeah. Help people understand what psychological safety is and what it isn't. It is not a license to say anything. It isn't just get the guns out and start firing bullets. There've got to be rules around how you engage. So it's about communication and how do we communicate? How do we speak up? How should I deliver this information? So sometimes hand in hand with the concept of psychological safety is work on communication protocols. We do work around toxic communication behavior. A lot of this is around awareness. The kind of model of coaching that I do starts with awareness. I call it the 5A model.
Okay.
Create awareness. Maybe that's education. What is psychological safety? What does it What does it mean for us? The second A is address. Is to start to have the conversation. Yeah. What does it mean for us? How do we do it? What's your opinion? What's my opinion? Through that addressing and conversation together as an intact team, you create a sense of alignment. Doesn't mean agreement. Sometimes you have to disagree. But yeah, we're kind of aligned. We want to do this. How do we do it? The action plan. And those are, it's all well and good getting to there and then going, okay, off you go and do it. How? They walk out of the room, and if you don't have an action plan, they'll forget. So creating that kind of action plan, which might have what I call the 3 R's, some concrete, achievable rituals, rhythms, and routines that are focused on communicating better, giving people an opportunity to be heard, celebrating when people do speak up, recognizing people, all of these sort of habits that you form. And it's a bit like brushing your teeth. We all brush our teeth without thinking about it because it's good for our gum health and it avoids tooth decay. And, there's all good reasons. And we just do it. We pick up the brush and twice a day, every day. And it's become a ritual. It is ritualistic. It has a routine twice a day, and it's the rhythm is twice a day. Rituals, rhythms, and routines. So what are they equivalent to of brushing your teeth for your team when it comes to psychological safety? I had one team, and the other thing is, I can't tell you what to do. Coaches who work with teams and relationships understand that we know that teams themselves are naturally creative, resourceful, and intelligent. I'm not there to give them the answer, because what's right for them isn't right for that other team, or what's right for me. I've got to suspend my kind of like, oh, I think you should do it like this, because they need to know for themselves, and they'll come up with it. As an example, I worked with a team on communication protocols. How do we communicate effectively around psychological safety? What happens if there's toxic behavior? What happens if there's blame or an argument or something? And, consciously together and getting the whole team involved to say, what do we do when that happens? Because there's fear. Oh, golly, I don't want to pour fuel on the fire. If people are getting emotional and there's an argument, if I try and step in, I better say nothing. Well, that's the wrong thing. They wanted to address it. So I said, well, what will you do? And there's silence. You've got to, as a coach, not fill the silence. You've got to let the team kind of come up with it. And somebody said, why don't we have like a safe word that we could use that means, there's toxic stuff going on. I kind of think we need to talk about it, but I don't want, So it's a non-triggering safe word. Oh, what a good idea. Okay, what should it be? And everyone stops and thinks. And then after a minute or two, someone goes, avocado. What? And there was humor, right? There's some lightness. So avocado has become a real ritual rhythm routine for them, where they can use it whenever they want. They can throw it into a meeting. And now they have, every 3 weeks, they have an avocado meeting where all they talk about, and they've got like rubber avocados on their desks and things like that.
Was that the 5th A, the avocado?
No, sorry. The 5th A was accountability. By going through that process, creating the actions, you have much higher chance of people delivering and being accountable to the action plan and to the team, because they contributed, they've had a chance to speak. There's this kind of looking in the eye moment in a coaching room where you request, will you do this? There's like, yeah, we're going to do this as best they can.
So you talked about toxic behaviors. What do they look like?
So, okay, I use, when I did my coach training, I was trained to use information from a study in America from the Gottman Institute. And John Gottman and his team studied couples. So the data and the research comes from marriages, but it's equally applicable to any type of team. And they were curious about what makes marriages fail. And the failure measure was divorce. What were some couples doing that 5 years down the line they were staying together, that the couples who weren't doing that kind of stuff were divorcing? So they invited couples to come into an apartment, much like this, and say, just go about your business. We're just going to watch and listen to what you're doing. And they would record their conversations. And they started to identify patterns of behavior that became indicators of failure, to the extent that over several hundred, if not thousands of couples, and they would follow them over many years and say 5 years later, are they still together or not? They identified what they call the 4 horsemen, 4 key toxic behaviors, that if they are consistently done in relationships and are not changed, will signal divorce. John Gottman can now watch a couple in the love lab, as they call it, for maybe a day or so, and he can predict with a 90% accuracy that they will divorce if they don't do anything to change how they are interacting. So this stuff is incredibly powerful. The 4 key behaviors are criticism, contempt, defensive,ness, and stonewalling. So these are this is the bank account analogy. If a relationship system, and a relationship system is basically a team. If you've got like 10 people on a leadership team, they're all kind of interconnected and kind of, if you imagine like a spider's web holding them together, their relationships and how they interact with each other, it belongs to everybody. So if there's toxicity between 2 people, sure as hell, it's going to ripple and infect the whole system. So if there is toxicity, it's incredibly damaging. It's going to turn people off. They're not going to make the choice to do the work that they're going to do. So every time there is a negative interaction, one of the four horsemen shows up and there's blame or contempt is the most poisonous, the most damaging, eye rolling, gossiping.
I've been there, with a former boss.
Yeah. And sadly, most people have. But it's human nature. It's normal to experience a level of toxicity. The key is to be aware of it and conscious of what is happening. Part of the process of coaching around it is just the education, telling the story about Gottman and everything else. And you get this. People start, nodding their heads. We all understand it. It's not rocket science. It's human.
Can it be cured in a way? I suppose that's possibly the wrong word. But, it's very easy to get into boss bashing. And we've all worked for bosses who have not been the best and have taught, they've been good teachers in some ways about how not to treat different people.
Yeah.
But sometimes, there's an increasing conversation about emotional intelligence. It's not something that leaderships have needed for the past 3 decades.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to you genuinely really do need emotional intelligence. There's a new McKinsey piece of research out just the other day with 10 transformational shifts. But that self-awareness as a leader and that ability to connect with emotions is one of the key 10 qualities. How do you work with leaders are they sometimes unconsciously toxic and they don't realize it? And within all of that psychological safety, your experience, how important is it for the leader to be part of that?
Yeah. Lots of different things to talk about here. Yes, it can be accidental. Liz Wiseman wrote the book Multipliers, great book about leadership, if anyone's a reader. And the concept of the leader, there are people you have been a leader in your life, whether it's at work or in a sports team, anywhere, teachers, when you were at school, who just seem to make you want to do more and give more. And you wanted to please them or do the work. And, and there are others that are diminishers who diminish you, who shut you down and get less out of you. Now, I don't believe there are many people who are doing that in a Machiavellian, deliberate way, but sadly there are some. Yeah. But we can be accidental diminishers. For example, the ideas guy. A lot of leaders, I've got all these great ideas because I know what I'm doing here. Fabulous, but they're not intentionally shutting people down, but they're kind of hogging the limelight of ideas. And actually, maybe the team has better ideas than you do. So you can learn the skills as a leader of being more of a multiplier and less of a diminisher. I see it as on the lens of the team, and the leader has a disproportionate influence. Sometimes we talk in coaching speak around edge work of teams crossing edges into a new reality in the future, and you get a sense in the room of they want to evolve, they want to change, and if you can imagine like a mountain edge. And over the other side is the desired future. And we're in our current primary state on this side. And the team needs to cross that edge. And going across edges can be weird and odd in terms of, it's the unknown and this kind of stuff. But if you want to change and evolve, you've got to get the team over that edge. Now, it isn't necessarily that it's 50% of the people. You've got a team of 10, it's 5 people that have to cross first. Because there's rank and privilege and skill and knowledge and all sorts of things that kind of matter. It might be that the leader has already gone over and he's going to pull the rest of the team with him or her. Where were we on this? We were talking about
toxic leaders. Can they?
All right. What can you do about toxic behavior? Yeah. Whose job is it? That kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. There are antidotes. There's prevention and cure. If you've got toxicity. What it needs, I can't coach a team that doesn't have anything they need to change and isn't willing to enter into the room and possibly the fire to be able to talk about it and do something about it. If there is no appetite for the team to do so, then I walk away. And I always make an assessment before I do any coaching of whether I should be coaching or not. I was briefed by HR for a team coaching assignment a little while ago, and they said, "Please come in. We've got a team with toxic communication, toxic stuff going on. Great, tell me about it." And HR told me all about it. And after half an hour, I stopped them and I said, "Do you know what you've just done?" And they said, "No." So you called me in to tell me about the team, and you've spent 30 minutes telling me about how poisonous the leader is. Does this person even know that you are talking to me? Oh, no, we haven't told him yet, because if he found out, then he's going to go to his little, disciples in the team, and he will make them deliberately derail coaching process. And I said, that's a red flag. I can't coach this. That's your problem. The problem here is with the leader. And you've got 3 choices of action. Number 1, you put up with it. But Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
This guy used to go for lunch with the CEO. He had got himself in all the right places. So either you just put up with it. Is it worth it? My argument is that it is not. You get rid of him or he changes. You need to figure that out first before I can then come and coach the team. I don't know what they are doing, for the record. So leaders are vital. Leaders are really important. And this is where I think leaders should get the money that they get paid. This is where you earn the money, is by having the courage to be the one that goes first. If you want to encourage psychological safety, you've got to show that it's okay to be vulnerable. You've got to show that it's all right to not know everything. Again, I worked with a team recently, and I love these guys because they've got a big job, leadership team, trying to take a business from $4 billion to $10 billion in the next few years. I mean, it's massive task. And they're like, okay, created a new team. I got in the room from day one with them. And we did an exercise around psychological safety, which is called the stinky fish. And the stinky fish concept is, if you buy a fish, you take it home, it smells all right, it's fresh. But if you don't put it in the fridge and you come downstairs the next morning, there's a bit of a whiff. And if you go to work and you come back in the afternoon, oh, what's that smell? The longer you leave it, the stinkier it gets. So what are the stinky fish in your team that you need to get out in the open and talk openly with each other about? So you set up the exercise for them to be able to answer a few key questions. For example, what's everyone thinking but no one is saying? And having the courage to actually answer that question. What's causing you anxiety or fear? What's in our past that we can't get over? That we got to deal with these stinky fish. And in that room, they write on Post-it notes and stick them up on boards, and then I invite them to review. And what I'm doing there is I'm revealing the team to itself. I'm asking, what are you noticing? What are you seeing? What are you saying about yourselves? So that they can then deal with it. And I noticed this Post-it that said, am I the right leader? And I thought, wow, obviously the leader has written that. And she's put that out there for everyone to see. And I said, are you happy? Are you okay for me to draw attention to that? And she said, that's exactly why I wrote it. And so we did, and everyone sat down, and I said, I'd like to talk about this one. It says, am I the right leader? And I let it go to the team. Again, you see what the reaction is. And the leader spoke. And she said, well, guys, we got a big job here, and sometimes I wake up in the night, I wonder if I'm the right person. Have I got what it takes? And her vulnerability in that moment was incredible. And
that is incredibly brave, because I advance the argument that 99.9% of leaders actually think that. There will be either a narcissistic or a psychotic breed that will never see it.
Yeah.
But most people who end up in leadership positions will often have that doubt. Now,
but they're all taught they've got to have this face and this kind of like facade of invincibility, and and this is it. People like that are changing the workplace. You should have. There was almost this like physical leaning in. And this comes back to the things that transcend culture, right? At a human level, what do we respond to? What makes us belong? For anyone, no matter where you're from, and the kind of almost oxymoronic kind of thing about vulnerability is people think vulnerability is weakness. And read what Brené Brown says about vulnerability. It is a superpower. I've seen it happen. And when she was vulnerable and expressed herself and laid herself out there for potential sniggering and fear and everything else, no, actually, we want to belong as animals. We want to be part of something. We want to be in something that has our back and we have their back. And when someone is vulnerable, it isn't that people will laugh. People will support. People will lean in. People will get around them. That is what happens. And we've got to get away from this kind of like silly attitude that vulnerability is weakness. It is one of the superpowers that teams can really benefit from.
That really feels like a mic drop moment. So, a quick while we're ahead, Andy, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us on the Mental Space today. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I have, remember, please subscribe on YouTube or on any of the podcast platforms. Once again, Andy, thank you for being here on the Mental Space today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.